How do you ship 250% more deployments without breaking production? That's the question I asked Ryan Cormack. Ryan is a principal engineer at Motorway in the UK, and he's also an AWS community builder. In London at the summit, he was recently recognized by Werner Vogel himself as a Renaissance developer, a topic that we have discussed in previous episodes already. So I wanted to sit with him because I wanted to understand why he got this recognition, but also how he's driving this massive adoption of AI within his team and the organization, and how they get much more efficient in increasing the velocity of the teams, but also providing more quality more consistently to the team. If you are wondering how to scale AI coding beyond one single developer, this one is for you. I hope that you will enjoy the show. And if that's the case, please leave a review and 5-star on your favorite podcast apps. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the AWS Developers Podcast. Today, I'm with Ryan Cormack. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, Ron. Yeah, doing really good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Super excited to have a conversation with you and to learn more about what you do. And also, I know that you are a community builder, and you have been also nominated as a Renaissance developer. So that will be the main topic of today, if that's okay with you. But let's start with introductions. So please introduce yourself.
Yes, yeah. My name's Ryan Cormack. As you mentioned, I'm an Amazon or AWS community builder, but also a principal engineer day to day at Motorway, company I work for in the UK, the UK's fastest growing used car marketplace. It's a pretty cool place to work. Life in the fast lane is really, really quick. Every day is different and exciting, which is nice. I've been using AWS for maybe 14 or 15 years now. So I mean, not an early adopter, but certainly I've been around for a while.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I started my career doing digital marketing quite a long time ago in a company that used to manage an on-premise co-location data center for different customers.
Mhm.
And I think at that time when I used to see a lot of people like operating the data center, right? And then as I started moving more and more into software engineering in the roles that I'm in now, it's been really interesting to see how that evolution of people managing a data center has changed to people making an API call and getting more machines than you could ever fit into a data center at one point. It's been really, really nice to see.
Exciting. Cool. Okay. So yeah, you have been around for a while actually, working on AWS. That you were one of the early adopters, at least in Europe, because 13 years ago, not so many people were, cloud ready.
Yeah. Yes. I was very clicking around the console, figuring out what was happening there. And I think EC2 in front, where we're pretty much it in, I don't even know how many US regions existed at the time. Maybe it was just one or two.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably Dublin for sure, and maybe Frankfurt. I can't remember. Yeah. Oh yeah. So good stuff. So and how did you join communities? I mean, you are a community builder. Tell us how you get there.
Yes, I never actually studied computer science formally at university or anything. So a huge amount of what I've learned has been learning by building over the years, which has been a really great way for me to learn actually. And the cloud made that easy, right? I didn't have to buy a rack in a data center to get going. But a lot of what I learned has been reading what other people are doing, seeing how other people are building things, and then I guess just trying it for myself. So I spent quite a lot of time reading, learning quite a few years ago, and always thought that it's a really possibly useful way for others to learn in the future. So few jobs ago and many jobs since then, I've always tried to, I guess, like almost lead by example or try and help people learn, or people who want to learn in the same way that I learn. I think I'm well placed to try and help them learn and discover new things. So yeah, I spend a lot of time reading and writing about what I've been doing, and then speaking about what I've been doing, and answering questions that others have on how things work, which has been really, really valuable. I think when people challenge you or ask what it is and why, like why is a really powerful word. People ask
Yeah.
why do things in a certain way. It's been nice challenging myself to make sure that I'm able to answer it.
Yeah, teaching others is a great way to learn yourself and dive deeper in topics. So definitely a good idea. Perfect, great. So 2 weeks ago, we didn't meet in London, but both of us were there. But more importantly, you were on stage at the keynote, at the main keynote. So tell us more about that, this experience, and also why were you on stage?
It was super exciting. So I've spoke at a London Summit before, but to significantly smaller audiences. I think it was maybe 6.5, maybe 7,000 people at the keynote. When I was doing the rehearsals, you stand up on the stage and it's like it's a big space. And
It is.
I ended up loving every minute of it, which was really, really cool. But myself and Motorway were talking about how we've started to adopt and roll out, I guess, the idea of agentic engineering across our engineering org, and then a little bit wider inside the company. And I guess um, as Motorway's grown, or we've tried to adopt more and more of these patterns, I think we've found ourselves in many ways pushing a lot of what we can do with the tools that we've got as far as we can push them, which is
Okay.
led us doing the product teams at AWS a whole bunch of feedback, which has been really, really nice. But we've been continuously iterating, learning, and evolving how we've been doing this for our internal tooling for quite a while now. And I think some of the stories and the way that we've seen these really big productivity gains has been really, really, a really, really nice message. At the same time, as we haven't seen an uptick in any of this negative tough sides that you see, then quite often it maybe in some cases can lead to chaos engineering practiced in the real world, and accidental chaos engineering in production is not the best way to go about that. But I think we've built the guardrails, patterns, and processes in place to move us away from going down that path, which has been really cool.
That's cool. So I would love for us to dive deeper on this. But before we start, can you tell us about how your teams are organized and what are some of the ceremonies that you have or had before and how AI changed that and also how maybe mm, how you are thinking about how your team should be organized now?
So I mentioned earlier that we're a fast growing startup based in the UK. So in that startup to scale up phase, and I think our teams are probably arranged typically how we might imagine most startups have. So we've generally got one product manager and one engineering manager per team, leading a team of three, four, five, six software engineers, and our UX designers, things like that, tend to be shared across parts of the business. So our marketplace is essentially a two-sided marketplace. So we have UX designers and then supporting both sides of these for our customers. And typically, our teams will work in 2 week sprint cycles. Some teams are getting more towards Kanban approach rather than a typical 2 week sprint. But
Okay.
generally, we practice continuous delivery, continuous integration. Our teams are fully DevOps aligned, I guess. So if teams want something, they're empowered to design it, build it, write it, test it, deploy it, and then support it. So we own full end-to-end delivery of things, which I think in many ways has helped us figure out how we adopt some of these AI patterns and practices quickly, because we find that some teams just naturally wanted to go really quickly into some of these.
Good. Good. Okay. So basically, you have cross-functional teams that are self-contained. They are responsible for one product, or at least one area. And I'm not sure I fully understood what you said about DevOps. It doesn't mean that what they own, what they develop, they run them in operation. So they are on call. They are operating end to end.
Yeah, we don't have a dedicated DevOpsy platformy type function. If a team wants to deploy a new DynamoDB database, for example, right? The team will write the infrastructure as code for it. They will deploy it. They will monitor it, and uh, everything goes wrong all the time. And when we do find that things go wrong, there'll be on call and support for it.
Okay, cool. So, meaning that you are very much aligned with the two pizza team concept model that we have at Amazon, where indeed we have teams that are self-contained. We have clear boundaries between the teams. We have clear contract between the teams, and teams have full ownership on the way they operate.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a pattern that I've seen across multiple companies that have been able to adopt AI more quickly, and that's interesting. So the fact that they are, designed the way you explained to us, seems to enable the adoption of AI and also make sure that we have impact. So can you tell us about the impact that you have been seeing for those teams? Because um, we have some good. I mean, there are some great numbers that every vendors are talking about, saying that more than 90% of developers are seeing productivity gains by using coding agents. That's great. What most of the vendors don't talk about is the fact that 91% of the companies don't see any impact on the way they ship more features or are able to support better their customers or ship with better quality. So what do you see on your side?
Yeah, we actually, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. We're really, really careful that as a business, we measure pretty much everything that we do. And most of that is typically born from like the experiment with our product approach, right? So every new feature, we experiment, understand the needle that it's moving and the impact that it's got to our customers and how we're changing things there. And we're adopting that into a developer experience process too. So you want to make sure that when we're introducing new tools like these AI coding assistants, that they are actually having a positive impact, and we can prove that they're having a positive impact, and we can prove that they're not having a negative impact, which is also, I think, a really, really important thing for us to understand.
Yeah.
And like the really interesting, I think, like really powerful metrics that we're seeing is that since we started adopting these, and I think we've been going quite heavily into it now for maybe 18 months or so, is that we've seen a 250% increase in deployments.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that doesn't strictly translate to an increase in deployments to production, but it reinforces that thinking of ship things little and often. So a lot of these deployments are to our development and staging environments, but we're still able to push a lot more changes, test a lot more things, iterate and see if changing things this way or this way in staging has a performance impact, for example, or a
Okay.
change in how our system and our application health is. And of course, also delivering that increased deployments to production. But it helps us roll things back quicker when things go wrong. So that whole mindset of iterate quick, often, little, and regularly gets massively reinforced and amplified by being able to do things quicker. And when it comes to looking at how our engineering teams specifically perform, we're seeing like a four times output and throughput from our engineering teams also. So that's everything from our general BAU work is able to go faster through to our resolution of production incidents happens quicker through to
Okay.
experimentation and understanding happens quicker. The toil that we've still got happens a little bit quicker. We can use our Gen AI tools now to update systems, packages, and dependencies across our entire estate significantly quicker than we've been able to before.
Wow, that's great. Okay, great to hear. So, one of the common pattern or theme that I see, with customers is that they for the people who have adopted AI coding assistant, for example, they are kind of solving the coding bottleneck that they used to face. But the next, I mean, you are pushing back the problem to down the line or to down the process, basically. So now you have much more PRs to review, and then your pipeline may not be fast enough to be able to ingest so many changes because, as you said, you have so many more. I mean, 250% more deployments. So how did you um, cope with that, and what did you? I mean, did you change the way your process work and or you design and how maybe you change the tools? So can you tell us more about your experience there?
Yeah, a really good question. I think I've always found that writing code hasn't isn't necessarily always the most important part of software engineering, but it's quite often been the bit that takes the longest. But the real
Yeah.
value is the outcome at the other end and the engineering upfront design and research that happens before you start writing code. So we try really, really hard now to amplify our own team's focus on those two parts of the problem to make sure that everything that we're doing at the start it has that rigor and that software engineering principles applied to it. And we can then delegate the coding to the AIs to help us do that quicker and review that bit at the other end of it. So we find that we quite often do a whole bunch of it's not the code review, but it's the engineering system review happens up front. And we use Kiro primarily. And Kiro has been really, really powerful at helping us build that plan at the start, which helps us understand the changes that it's going to make and the way
Perfect.
that it makes them and the impact that it might have across our other systems. So when it comes to doing the code review at the other end, we've got a pretty good understanding already of the direction that it will look on. And of course, these things hallucinate and they can maybe go off track, things like that. So we make sure that we still have human in the loop at the other end. But we use AI assistants now to help us code review or I guess review the systems that we've got. So we make heavy use of it at the start and at the end. And because it's built that plan, we know that when we've got code at the end, we can have like a very, very first summary high level pass of has the code that's been implemented, does that properly reflect the plan that was discussed and iterated on at the start of the process? So we can help it make sure that we've got a general guidance in the right direction there. And then
Uh-huh.
a whole bunch of other tools, software engineering tools to make sure that we've got the appropriate like code coverage in place or the correct cyclomatic complexity to make sure that we haven't written code that, while functionally might work, is incredibly hard to review and incredibly hard for humans in the loop to still maintain. So make sure that we're driving that full software cycle iteratively the whole way across. And the output and that number of deployments that we've got, I think, has gone up so much because we're trying to use these systems to break things down now too. We don't have a large piece of work that ends up with a large pull request at the end of it that's really, really hard to review. Even
Yeah.
if the agent does do one ticket with a huge PR, it's now also incredibly easy for us to get the agent, another agent to go off and break it down into small chunks. We review small chunks at a time. Our pipelines run pretty quickly already to get things out into production. And then we can just start reviewing isolated parts of this the whole time to go through, rather than requiring us to do, like you say, huge pull requests at the end of the process.
Good. Okay. So let me try to rephrase what you said. So basically, you are leveraging Kiro spec-driven development and the process around that to really spend the engineering time on and design the system so it will be able to be scalable and well designed and aligned to your way of working, and then you let the agent develop small chunks of feature sets. So at the end of it, it's easier to review. But before you review, or before a human in the loop is there, there's another agent that is going to review the specs and whether the code that has been released is aligned and align with the specs that were defined earlier. So that's the first quality gate, I suppose, and then you have a human in loop that is reviewing, or are you doing more? Have you got a extensive feedback loop or testing feedback loop between the review and the human?
Yeah, so a large number of our systems do have, I guess, unit or I guess code level tests. We do have some
Yeah.
integration in places which help us validate certainly some of our key or our critical flows in places. And because those are, I guess, essentially tested at the boundary without the internals, if the agent changes one of the internals and it breaks how our boundary works, then we get that feedback loop pretty quickly in a deterministic way. So I think that's really important that we still have a whole bunch of deterministic processes in place to make sure that our systems are still working as expected, as well as the non-deterministic, but tightly scoped, guided, and directed AI agent feedback processes.
Good.
And we
Can you tell us more about those deterministic steps that you have so to validate that you are making good progress?
Yeah, it's just, I guess, I'm going to say typical integration or end-to-end type tests. So we may have our CI pipeline will deploy the application and we'll run the tests against it. So and testing the boundary, right? Maybe HTTP requests to the real service and
Good.
asserting real known response back out the other side of it. And we're actually going through a process right now to find out how we can speed that up even more. So right now it's reliant on our CI process to deploy it to a, a real ephemeral style environment, but seeing if we can shift this even further left. So we don't have to even wait for the CI deployment pipeline process to run. The agent locally or remotely is able to run our application itself and
Yeah.
test its own self. So we speed things up even further.
Yeah, that's how I've seen teams working, and I'm also doing that as well. Trying to shift left all the testing that we used to do in CI, and because agents are great at mocking also other services. So even if you are not able to have the full app running on your system, you can still have AI helping with the mocks, and then you can really test. Do minimal test, and that's a great feedback loop for the agent to correct and self assess how much um, deviation they had compared to what was initially planned. So pretty good,
Yeah.
good stuff.
And a lot of this process we can parallelize now too. So historically, if we wanted to do a piece of work, we would have one, two engineers pair on it or work on it together, and they would do the piece of work and we'd review it. And like the work that they were doing is kind of we would expect that to be the work that gets released because
Hmm.
typically the writing code process was always the longest part of a lot of this work.
For
But
sure.
that it's so much quicker to write code, we can still focus on the plan up front. And we can maybe have two or three different agents try and satisfy those requirements themselves in isolation from each other, but in parallel. So we maybe have three or four different options, check the quite often they end up doing very similar things because the the planning is so almost prescriptive that we understand exactly what it's going to end up doing. But they can try different approaches, or maybe we change the prompt slightly to force it to try different approaches to solve the same problem. And then when we want to review it at the end, still with that human in the loop, we're able to then see a couple of different options that we've got that are running and functionally that are implemented to help us think how that might fit into our wider picture and our wider approach for how we're building the rest of our systems, which has been another really nice change and approach to how we can build these because we're not limited by how quickly can we write code anymore. We can massively experiment with different options.
Okay. Wow, that's good. That's really good. So do you do that often or all the time, or is this just for few things that you're exploring? How does it work?
We
What's the
certainly
mental model?
don't do it for everything. I think different teams, I mentioned at the start, some of our different teams have, I guess, different curiosity or moving at different paces for things. And some teams or some people on some teams might, I don't know, it's my lunch break. I'll get something to try, three or four different versions of it, try three or four different approaches, come back after lunch and review everything and see how it's gone. Or maybe if we're starting off a new project for the first time, we've got an option to do we try a new piece of technology or that we think might work really well, or go with our existing approach, which might not be the most optimal, but we're not really sure. We can just try both in parallel, and that will give us it's much more detailed result than looking at some documentation that's got basic examples. We can now see in our context of motorway what these examples would look like. And I think that helps us as teams relate much more to how this technology would work or the different approaches or different ways that a new type of system would work to help us get us a better understanding of should we adopt a new technology or not.
Okay, perfect. How much are you relying on the customized agents, so that are, you know, experts or you know focused on one task, or versus having a generalist agent that the developer is working with.
I think that's changed a lot in the year, 18 months or so that we started it, but very early on in our journey, we wanted to make sure that we were providing motorway knowledge as much as we could to our agents that are working. Like even a year ago, the knowledge that some of these large LLMs, some of these LLMs had is huge. And
Yeah,
tend to know most things, or they tend to know enough things about most things that can do the job, but they don't know how we work at all. They don't know
yeah.
anything about our pipelines, our API design guidelines, our business logic, some of the nuances to our particular industry or the way that we operate in it. And so very early on, we defined some steering files for Kiro that we could share out across all of our teams. So all of our teams, if they wanted to use Kiro, they just got access to all of these by default, and we could maintain them in one place. And again, have reasonable confidence that they would feed into it, because
Okay.
it's still not guaranteed, but it's way better than us having to remember how all of these things work all the time to feed into that, which again helped with that planning process, and it helped with the review process at the other end. We were so well structured and defined up front. And then over time, we've iterated on this slightly. So we have our steering documents, and we now have a whole bunch of custom skills that we can use. Everything from a skill that is very prescriptive on how to bootstrap an application from start to build something new.
Yeah.
Skills that are very prescriptive on how to debug maybe an application load balancer log or a CloudFront access log for a specific application and service based on, I don't know, maybe our AWS resource tags and things like that for our applications to understand what might be going on there, and through to how our CI pipelines work. So we develop custom agents or custom Kiro agents that are very, very tightly scoped to needing only the tools that you might need to
Mhm.
either build a new CI pipeline or monitor your application going through the CI pipeline, and it's got access to the tools, the specific tools that it needs to then monitor the application once it's gone through the pipeline, is now running in production. And we can have these running locally if we need to, and it will give us that really, really quick feedback that, oh, maybe this isn't looking quite right, or it's changed your CPU profile by 0.5%, 1%, 3%. That's probably within acceptable boundaries, so fine to go. But it just means that we don't have to do the busy work of sitting there watching graphs or, I don't know, maybe anxiety about just release something. Is the pager going to go off? I'm not sure. Heroes sitting there for us, making sure that checking these things as our code is going out. So yeah, we have ended up with some very specific steering files and very prescriptive skills and agent profiles for some dedicated tasks.
Okay. Good. So that's great. So meaning that you moved from having one agent that you supercharge with all the knowledge that is specific to motorway, to now using more um, scope down type of agent that are customized with specific skill set and access to tools and prompts that help them achieve some very specific tasks. How do you orchestrate them? How do you rely on the main agent that is going to launch sub agents within Kira, or have you created a different approach to that?
Yeah, that's typically where we get started with things. So we quite often, I think the Hero default agent might have access to all of the sub agents that we've got defined. So we've got shared sub agents that are, we think anyway, suitable for all of our engineering teams. And some of our engineering teams or our systems and services have agent profiles committed to those repositories for those specific NIFO specific tasks. But typically, we'd probably start with like the default agent that is aware of all of these sub agents. And our engineering teams might say, oh, if I want to build a CI pipeline, can we do this? Then it will know, oh, I've got access to this agent, it will go off and do it. There are some
Okay.
other teams though, where we will just default go straight to a dedicated one. So I think this might, or certainly my usage of it anyway, tends to be that I know there's like an ops ops agent that we've got that has access to these debugging skills and things. So I'll launch Kiro with this specific ops agent in mind to go away and do things. But we continue to refine this all the time, particularly as the knowledge of these system or these agents gets improved, their ability to do things gets improved, and their training cutoff is obviously evolving all the time. So we want to make sure we're all constantly refining things. There may have been a time a year ago where we had to say, um, use this version of a package. It definitely exists. Now it just knows that it exists. So
Yeah.
trim out some of the context and just rely more on its knowledge rather than us pushing it in certain ways. I guess it helps manage that context that we're applying to it a bit better.
Good. Okay. So okay, so you have developed this, let's say the AI context, the AI agent, the agentic context for agents to be more efficient. How do you share those? Because that's a common, challenge that customers are sharing with us. So,
Yeah.
do you have any magic recipe for managing and sharing skills and distributing all your MCP servers and the customized agents?
Unfortunate that there's no magic finish yet. I think it's something that's fed back to the service team a bunch that it'd be really, really nice if there was a bit more of a managed way to do this. But for maybe the last probably close to a year now, we've just been managing it through a Git pipeline. So we have a GitHub repository that it started off with only one or two people, but now a huge number of our engineering team is committed to it because people people on the team see someone doing something and think, oh, like, what are they doing? That's a really cool thing. So we'll share it and we'll share it via a central GitHub repository. So the Git repository takes all of these things and it will take out things like our steering files, Kiro powers, custom agent profiles, skills. Maybe that's it.
SOPs? Are you using SOPs?
We tend to bake these more into the system prompts for agents. So if we want to do
Okay.
a dedicated agent for a practice, and it knows what to do here. And all of these get committed to Git, and we've got a CI pipeline for this that will take all of these, stores them in an S3 bucket, and we've got an internal CLI and DevX tool that we can use that will automatically pull those down anytime someone wants to start using it. And it just
Nice. Okay.
cool to um, to keep everyone's or our engineering teams will run that tool again to keep their uh, own things up to date.
Good. Okay. Perfect. Great to know. Yeah. I think it's a common path for customers when they are adopting. So it's good to
Yeah,
see that. Yeah.
it's actually
And
proved quite interesting because we store it in a way that isn't unique for humans, right? Like CI pipelines and agents are also very capable of downloading things from S3. It means that we can take those same agent profiles that we use, and when we run things like Kiro in our CI pipelines, Kiro in our CI pipeline is also able to download and get access to our steering files and our specific agent tasks. So if we ever use Kiro to do things like review a new API design, it's able to see and read our API design steering guidelines and make sure that these things all align with each other. So we find ourselves
Mhm.
using it more and more and more. So we always get the benefit of we can use it and the agent can use it. And we try never to design things specifically for agents or for humans. We want us to generally be working with access to the same tools where practical.
Can you share how many developers do you have across the company?
Yeah, there's about maybe 120, 130 people, I think, working across our
Okay.
product engineering and data is around that,
Okay.
and maybe a little bit more.
So so can you tell us how you enable, a fairly large team I mean, obviously, because the way, I mean, you described the teams being you know, around 5 to 6 people. So, so that means that you have many teams, probably, 20 of them, or more inside of the company. So, how do you what type of mechanisms or have you used to drive this change and drive good practices and raise the good practices that are happening in pockets and make sure that they are generalized.
We've actually been, I think, tried to be really careful not to mandate the use of any particular tool in any particular way. So a lot of our teams have experimented with a bunch of different tools over a long period of time, but
Yeah.
typically have standardized around using Hero now for a lot of reasons. Like it makes we're able to grant everyone access to it really easily. As an example, right? Like all of our engineering teams get access via our AWS Identity Center. So
Good.
this gives everyone the same access to Hero via that, so we can log in, and we've got the idea of like these shared steering files, agent profiles. We've got a lot of tooling and things like that around it. Um, and we find that I think when we make doing things the right way, the easy way, then more people tend to gravitate towards it. And I mentioned earlier that a lot of this has almost been organic, right? Like someone might see someone on the team doing something in a particular way and
Yeah.
realize, we've got a whole bunch of the toil or the more boring work that they've got to do, and we can delegate that off to agents. They're asking, "Oh, how do you do that?" So they'll pick it up and they'll start using it. So we make the right thing the easy way, and most people tend to use it. We also run weekly, almost like weekly drop-in sessions. So myself or
Okay.
someone else will. It tends to be typically like show and tell of things that we've been working on with agentic tooling in mind, or asking someone, "Oh, I kind of want to do this, or I've got this problem. Could I use some AI to solve it?" And a bunch of people all contribute towards this session now, where everyone can answer everyone else's questions. We feedback. We're able to share tips, patterns, processes, new tools, new ways of working that we found to try and just help, I guess, bring that community of almost like more forward thinking or more people who are pushing things further to more extreme or more confident or comfortable trying new things at work, and help share
Mhm.
that. So we help everyone take advantage of some of the great work that people are doing.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. So yeah, I think so far we have been discussing a bit of technology, but more importantly, how the team have been adopting and maybe some of the way you are organized and how you are augmenting your teams with agents now, and the fact that you're using fleets of agents or cluster of agents that are working together. Um, how does it change your ceremonies that you used to have? I mean, have you saved times on that, or how do you? You used to. You said earlier that you were used to have sprints over a few weeks. So, what does it look like now?
Because we certainly have a higher throughput of tickets in some places, but the human aspect of this is still really, really important for us. And we're still a software engineering team, and we are still the people driving the way forward here, and we're delegating to AI. It's not delegating to us on what we
For
should
sure.
do. So we still make sure that we have like our teams, some of our teams work remotely or on different days, and some teams, some people are in the office. So we still make sure that we spend that time together to talk through what we're doing and why. Not only does it help us keep that human in the loop aspect of not just
Mhm.
code, of the engineering review process, it just helps us make sure that we're always learning from each other, sharing what it is that we're doing, and just continuing to be aware of what's going on. We don't use AI for everything because sometimes it's more efficient, more reliable right now to just do some things. Like occasionally, I still write some code myself. Really, really important to still be doing that. So we make sure that we still have plenty of time together for our teams. As for how it's actually changed the ceremonies, though, I think in some places they maybe sped up a little bit, or we don't have to go to the same depth on some things. Quite often, it's easy for us to summarize and or push more continual feedback in. So as we're working on something, for example, when we finished a piece of work, we're able to um, get like small summaries that we can more easily just send on to Slack. Or if people have started building their own tools This is actually really, really cool. This was a tangent. Now that it's so easy to write code, it's so easy to build your own tools to speed up
Yeah.
your way of working for things. So we have people across teams who just build their own tools now that are able to summarize Slack messages that they've got, condense it up, compare that to Jira tickets or GitHub issues that they've been working on, to the pull requests that they've got, to releases that they've done, to just help them stay on top of the noise volume that's coming from everywhere. So some of our ceremonies are maybe a little bit more a little bit faster for the ceremonial side of it, but the human interaction engagement I think is still something that it's now easier for us to have better human engagements that aren't so caught up in like a discussion on, oh, did we do this? I'm blocked by that. It's easy through blockers. And we still spend a bunch of human time now making sure that across the teams, we're understanding exactly what's going to get changed and how. So we maybe adapted the more focus on the planning part of things, which is, I think, more valuable for the whole engineering process.
Yeah. Very cool. That's cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned a bunch of tools. So let's talk about technology now. You have standardized on Kiro, IDE and CLI, a mix of them.
Oh, um, yes, a mix of them, and in many cases, neither of them. A few months ago, Hero CLI introduced support for ACP, the Agent Client Protocol, which allows,
Yes.
I guess, any client to interact with the Hero agent behind the scenes. And I think the CLI was the first to take advantage of this. So I'm going to try and
Is
split
all.
the CLI becomes the client, and behind that there is the Kiro agent that happens to be running, and those two are now decoupled from each other over ACP. But quite a lot of our team have been building their own tools on top of ACP now. So we have
Cool.
people built really cool tools that it's almost their own workflow board. So if they can click a button that says start ticket 123, and that will launch a Kiro instance over ACP with a custom agent that reads from Jira, populates their own workflow board. It's a native Swift app, and they can drag this across their screen. And the next column might be like do the work. That will launch a custom Hero ACP agent that will go away and it will clone the
Mhm.
repos, do the work that it needs to. They'll drag that log again. It will do a code review with a different dedicated agent to do that. Move it in CI flow. Custom agent over ACP will go away and it will help check what's going on through that. Another custom one that will check for comments every couple of minutes. Another UI inside this app that will show you the code diff that you built for all of this. I think it really allows people to work the way that we want to work or the way that they want to work. We're not, I've said for so long, I don't know if confined is the right word, but we're not confined to using an IDE or a CLI.
It's the correct word. Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's amazing, and we do see that also inside of Amazon. A lot of our SDEs, our software development engineers, they have been building their own tools on top of ACP. We have a channel with the ACP, and many people say, "Hey, this is what I built," and I think that leads to another question. There were some discussions on social media, like 1 or 2 months ago, and still happening about are IDEs dead because you don't spend that much time in IDEs, and I think the consensus now that we're seeing is that we need a new IDE, and because we still need to interact, but we need to create our new IDE with different capabilities, and ACP is a great enabler for doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like IDE, right? Integrated Developer Environment. Once upon a time, IDEs were CLI interface or Vim,
Yeah.
things like that. And they migrated over to more rich things. I've got a big .NET background, so I used to love sitting in Visual Studio, right? Huge, great IDE that's perfect
Eclipse.
for many things. Exactly, right? And they're fully featured to standardize around how humans used to have to write code. But
Yeah.
the next generation of IDEs might be something that's got two panels with a constant diff and a chatbot. I've made my own version of how I like to work, and it just is that, right? It's a chat panel on one side and a diff viewer on the other side. So I can see what's changing the whole time, tag a specific line. Actually, this line's not right. Update, change, evolve. Really, really powerful. And yeah, we see people who've never written Swift before got native Mac apps. Someone's never written Rust before, and we've got a native Rust desktop app because it doesn't really matter. It's so quick to do and like work to them. I guess the only thing that we really do try and standardize around is like the interface of how we work. So typically, when we're writing code, right, we'll program to interfaces rather than concrete implementations. And our interface is GitHub for source control, GitHub Actions for CI pipeline, Jira for ticket work in progress management. But the implementation of how our engineering teams do that process, it's up to them. Just as long as we commit our code to GitHub, it goes through our CI pipeline, and we move a Jira ticket along a swim lane. Yeah, like it's really,
That's
really
fine.
see how people are evolving the way they work.
Yeah, totally. Um, I got questions from several customers about, are you still using Jira at Amazon, or are you still using, uh, Gits and so on? So we don't use Jira internally. We have our own tool that we've developed over time. But that's definitely a question that I'm hearing a lot. So you do use GitHub, and it's great, and Jira. How do you see that in the future now that we are in an agentic way? I mean, and are you know, how do you? What's your perspective on Jira, for example?
I don't have a particularly strong view for or against it. I think Jira, like, there's a backlog, there's a work in progress, there's stuff that I've done. It's really, really helpful for us understanding and measuring sort of how quickly things are moving. So I mentioned some of those metrics and things we've got before. We can get a lot of that because we've got a lot of information and data in Jira, and it helps us understand, as well as Git commit messages, obviously. But if we want to see why a piece of code was changed, we're able to see the Jira message. It might often have additional bits of information attached to it, maybe some feedback from a customer, maybe some wireframe
Right.
mockups, and things like that. So it is nice to help link things together. That said, Jira is the interface. The implementation of logging onto Jira.com and moving things along the swim lane, I don't know if everyone is still doing that or if everyone needs to do that, because our agents and our skills that we've got, when we finish a piece of work, it can help us write a commit message and mark the Jira ticket as done or in CI or ready for release, whatever it is that we need to. So you don't have to interact with Jira, but it still works as a really good interface for the way that we work. Same with GitHub, GitHub Actions, a whole bunch of tools and things like that that we've got, or
Yeah,
monitoring.
for sure.
Quite often the best interface for this is the interface that works well for the person using it. It isn't the interface that exists. So we can interact with CloudWatch and with Datadog and with any other tools that we need to via ACP, right? Via the agent that we've
Yeah.
got, plus manage these processes. And we can also log in if we need to. But I don't think we're constrained by it.
I think the underlying question that I'm getting from customers is the fact that, since humans are not coding anymore, they are more directing the work, and the agents keep track of things in trackers of some sorts. On Kiro, we have the plan, the task list, and so on. And uh, so. Um, I think a question is, because we have those specs that we store, that we version and everything. Is there a need to keep another system next to it? So I think that's the question that I'm getting a lot. And I don't have a strong point of view, but I do see theirs, and why they are changing this.
Yeah. And this like that's going to be an interesting change. I don't think we're quite there yet with where I'm going, but like, we've got loads of user stories, right? If you think of an online e-commerce shopping site,
Yeah.
there's never a user story that says, as a user, I want to use JavaScript to buy a t-shirt. People want
Yeah.
to buy a t-shirt on the internet, right? JavaScript and HTML happens to be the way that we've found best to do it. But I think that again is an implementation detail and people don't really mind or care what it's written in. But if we can have a spec that says, I want to use a user interface on my laptop to order a t-shirt. And the agent like figures out what the artifact of that output looks like. And it might happen to be JavaScript and HTML, CSS and things, but it's ultimately not something that is like, I don't think it's a huge part of what the software engineering process is. It's understanding the options that you've got and the way that you can satisfy this requirement and do these things. So I think eventually a long way in the future, right? So I don't think it's very close at all. 'Cause right now, specs are more how to do a specific task rather than how the
Mhm.
system, and they're not necessarily always changing. We typically tend to have spec for a specific requirement, and when we've got an evolution of that requirement, we'll have a new spec for it rather than iterating the current workflow for it. But I mean, way in the future, I think it'd be interesting to see how that evolves because I think it would be an interesting place to be. That we're much more product engineering mindset focused to understand how things work with to satisfy the people who are wanting these fixes.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, I need to write this line of code or this library will help me fix that.
Yeah, that's true. And funny that you're saying that I made some research and there's definitely a trend of new roles being opened in startups, mostly in the Silicon Valley and starting to land also in Europe. People, I mean, companies hiring product engineers now.
Yeah,
So definitely a big theme.
feels the way it's going, and I think it's interesting because like that I think that role is going to be around for a while, and it's certainly something that is becoming more and more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a great segue to the next point. Actually, we talked about you know the processes and how your team are organized. We talked about technology here. I think that the most important and sometimes you know overlooked aspect of the transformation is the mindset that you need to have. And you are a Renaissance developer, so tell us more about it.
Yeah, I mean that was cool from Werner a couple of weeks ago. I remember watching his keynote for speaking about this idea of a Renaissance developer back in December. Really,
December. Yeah.
yeah, I think the just that mindset of like be curious. I mentioned like why is a really powerful question to ask. Like it isn't that this is what we're doing. It's like why? How should this work? What should we do? So yeah, I mean, didn't learn computer science at university. Was just really curious on how things work. Wanted to know what to do, how things worked. Not being afraid to break things. And there's another big Werner quote: like, "Everything fails all the time. Like
All
we
the time.
expect it to fail, and we should understand how we recover quickly from failure, and think about how we not how do we stop it breaking, but how do we fix it faster when it does break." And just always been really interested in making sure that we're able to iterate on things like this, going quicker. Um, I mentioned a few times now that we try to spend more time upfront on like the engineering discovery side of things, and a huge amount of that is around how systems work and how our systems should integrate and communicate with each other. And that isn't necessarily just how does our code and systems work, but thinking about it motorways specifically, like the wider landscape of our online, our used car marketplace. How does the car marketplace work? And that is a huge
Yeah.
impact on how we think about building the systems that help support that car marketplace. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
yeah, it maybe fits into that product engineering mindset and role and things. But yeah, I think like that big curiosity bit, always learning. Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? Like engineering has changed more in the last 18 months than it maybe had done in the 6, 7 years before that, or maybe like the
Oh yeah, for sure.
12 years I've been doing it before. And yeah, it's fast paced. Always learning is a powerful one right now.
Yeah. So yeah, Werner captured five qualities. So you talked about being curious. I think there's about ownership. So that's a strong leadership principles at Amazon. So what you build, you own it, and so so you're responsible for that. And you said that your teams are operating this way. There is one around. the polymath. That's something I didn't know about, but basically, you know, being able to, I mean, obviously connected to being curious and learn new things, and like Da Vinci, being able to master different skill sets, and learning new skills and broaden your T to become you know um, uh, a well-rounded engineer. And another one is think in systems, I guess. Also, instead of having a narrowing view of your work, but more think about the potential dependencies that you have with the rest of the system, and what you do here may have an impact down the line. And I'm missing one. And I'm missing one aspect of it. It's going to come back. I
I
think.
think it's experimentation, willingness to fail, adaptability. I think big theme through there.
Yeah, I think it's communication. Yeah, communication is the fifth one that I was missing. The fact that we need to be more thoughtful about the way we communicate, and specifically with agents, where ambiguity can lead us to wrong outcome, as we do with humans, basically. But with humans, we have feedback loops, and we can refine things. Whether the agent can say, "Okay, I understand what you said," and I go and specs are a good way to to communicate with agents. Cool. All right. I think we have done a big tour of everything here. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think it's just been really interesting seeing this space evolve so quickly. And one of the things I think is quite exciting is seeing how a fragmented landscape, maybe only 18 months, 2 years ago, so many different tools, so many different ways of working are now kind of coming together. And a lot of these tools are kind of doing things in very, very similar ways. And since Kira launched with its spec-driven development, right, like this kind of approach and mindset and thinking is it found its way into a whole bunch of other tools, which has been
Yeah,
interesting and really powerful because yeah, I think it really allows us to double down on that thinking of the software engineering isn't writing code. Software engineering is all about planning and understanding and thinking through that system. And the code is was a huge part of that years ago, and it's now possibly like becoming an increasingly smaller part of it, as it's so easy to write so much now.
totally, totally. All right. I have a few questions before we close this. So, would you have a book to recommend? Something that you found so good that you would like to offer that to everyone?
I mean, there's so many interesting ones. I think with like AI, things like that, it's exploding. I've read loads on distributed systems. I think Gregor Hope's got the architect elevator of thinking about maybe that plays a lot into that communication part, not just with machines, but operating different parts of the business and down with the engineering teams, and then a little bit higher up communicating how these things work with some other leaders. But the one that stands out to me is probably a bit more of an old one, but it's the Phoenix Project by
Yes, a great one.
Gene. Yeah,
Gene Kim. Yeah.
yeah. Really thinking about that, like that DevOps, own the whole process, culture, understanding how things work. And I think it resonated with me when I read it because Brent is a big character in the book. And I think everyone knows Brent, or everyone can identify with Brent at some point or another.
Well, yeah,
Really, really powerful way of thinking about how businesses, technology, and things like that can like change and evolve over time. And especially like when
definitely.
it's way easier.
Have you read the following one?
Yeah.
The
Yeah. I
Yeah,
prefer the Phoenix Project, but Unicorn Project is
same.
also good, yeah.
Yeah, same. Okay, cool. What are you going to learn next or dive deeper on?
Ooh. One of the things that I've been really interested in recently is uh, running agents. So we spoke a lot today about how we're using agents to help me and teams do things. Spending a lot of time thinking about how I run agents in production, what they can do,
Mhm.
how they run. So spend a lot of time reading, understanding how Strands, it's an open source agent framework works,
Yes.
and thinking about how I can run that in places, and a huge amount of the protocols and standards. I mentioned everything sort of standardizing around a few things now, but I mentioned ACP already. Maybe a lot of people have heard of MCP, the Model Context Protocol, but there's A2A for agent generated, AGUI for agent generated UIs. Thinking a lot about how these might evolve the landscape over time, and how that's going to change. So yeah, learning a lot more about that now.
Yeah, perfect. Great. And final question, who should I interview next? What other developers should you recommend? Or would you like to listen to on the podcast?
So there's an engineer at Amazon or AWS called, I think, Claire Ligori, and
Yeah, yeah.
worked on Kiro. Spent a lot of time working on Kiro.
Strengths.
And Strands, yeah. And as part of Werner's keynote in December, and I think more recently has been working a lot with MCP on the steering committee for seeing where that's going.
Is.
Yeah, I think it'll be really, really interesting. So Claire's going to have some really cool insight on where some of this stuff is going. See how it's changed over the last few months, year or so.
Yeah. So Claire was, I mean, fun fact, Claire was on my loop when I interviewed for Amazon. So, so yeah, tough, tough loop at that time. But yeah, and she's coming up on the podcast soon.
Oh, cool. Here we go.
Yep. Yeah.
Look forward to
So
it.
perfect. Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It was a great discussion, Ryan. Very glad to have you today, and thanks for sharing all those learnings. And I know that you are also working on a bunch of tools that you are publishing on GitHub. So definitely, I will put some links to your work on the show notes. And yeah, hope to see you again.
Yeah, amazing. Nice one. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Cheers. Bye bye.